A hearty welcome to one and all from the online learning platform at Department of Civil Engineering, BMS Institute of Technology and Management. My name is Dr. Rajesh Gopinath and we are here with respect to the course Environmental Protection and Management. Last class we had learnt about environmental performance evaluation. If you recollect, we had spoken about performance indicators and their importance in terms of comparison between the past and the present requisites. Today, as can be seen in slide 4, we shall be discussing about Environmental Statement 5, that is also called as Form 5. Slide 5. Today's class, we shall be discussing this topic in the following manner. First, we shall have a brief introduction. Then we shall have a glimpse of the framework of this Form 5. Further, we shall also visualize a filled framework. Then we shall try to understand its importance before moving on to the summary. And finally, the references have been listed for your kind perusal. Slide 6. It is obvious that any industry which falls under the category of or applies to or comes under the 1974 Water Act or the 1981 Air Act or the 1989 Hazardous Waste Act or the 1986 Environmental Protection Act have certain obligations and responsibility towards the society, the environment and the government. One such obligation is the Form 5. As per the 19th November ruling of 1986 by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, now also called as Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, had mandated that every industry who falls under the category as aforementioned shall submit a document for the financial year, which is from 1st April to 31st March of the following year, on or before 30th September of the same year. Which means an industry has to undertake documentation, and let us say the documentation is for the period of 1st April 2018 to 31st March 2019. Then this document must be submitted to the State Pollution Control Board well before 30th September of 2019. Defined by the International Chamber of Commerce as a management tool, a systematic, periodic, documented objective evaluation, Form 5 helps organizations in order to safeguard and protect the environment. Let's move on to slide 7. My dear friends, this is how the Form 5 looks like. Form 5 basically has 9 parts. Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, Part E, Part F, Part G, Part H and Part I. In slide 7, you are looking at Part A. As obvious, Part A requires basic information about the occupier, that is the industrialist. It requires information about the type of industry. It also requires the year of establishment and the date when the last environmental statement was submitted. Moving on from part A to part B in slide 8, this speaks about consumption of natural resources such as water and any other raw materials as applicable to the industry. It is obvious when you look at part B, even the consumption of water has been categorized with respect to the domestic demand and the industrial demand. That is, water which is required for basic consumption comes under domestic demand. Water which comes under the category of cooling or as a raw material comes under the other category. Now, if you look at the table very clearly, it speaks about the consumption pattern for the previous financial year and the current financial year. Hence, when the industry enters this data, they get a very clear picture of whether they have consumed more water or they have saved more water. For industry, saving more water transcribes to saving more investment. The same logic applies as well to the raw materials. Now, when it comes to raw materials, the industry is expected to name it and also explain the quantitative consumption. Let's move on to slide 9. In slide 9, that is part C, we speak about generation of pollution. And this is in the context of air pollution and water pollution. Here the industry has to give details of the quantum of pollution which has been caused. And also the industry is expected to describe the percentage of variation from the prescribed standards. For instance, it can be the National Ambient Air Quality Standards or any relevant standard with respect to water, fresh water or effluent. Moving on to part D, slide 10. This part of the document basically requires data from the industry, the occupier, with respect to the hazardous waste that it is employing. Now, as clear, the hazardous waste can be generated from two domains. One is the actual process and the other is during the pollution control, that is treatment of the waste. Again, the information has to be provided quantitatively for the previous financial year and the current financial year. Moving on, part E speaks about solid waste which has been generated for the previous financial year and the current financial year. Again here, the solid waste is categorized in three domains, that is from the actual process, further from the pollution control facility when treatment takes place, and thirdly, the quantum which has been recycled or reutilized. Let's move on to slide 11. Slide 11 shows part F. If you recollect in the previous slide, in the previous part, that is part D, we had spoken about hazardous waste. In part F, the industry has to provide data with respect to the strength and the quantity aspect of hazardous waste and solid waste, which was discussed in part E. Not only has the industry expected to describe the characteristics, but also it must list what all disposal practices they have been following. Part G, it speaks about how the pollution control measures have benefited or impacted natural resources from a conservative point of mind, and also subsequently how these measures have reduced the cost of production. Part H speaks about additional investment proposals which have been carried out by the industry or the enterprise towards pollution abatement, towards environmental protection. Finally, Part I. This is a miscellaneous part of the document which contains any other aspects with respect to protecting the environment and controlling the pollution, which basically speaks about pollution. Here, it is understood that if the industry is not polluting the water, henceforth they have mentioned it as not applicable. However, this need not be really applicable to all the industries, and those industries which basically contaminate the water would be listing here the list of those pollutants which pollute the fresh water and have a subsequent impact on the ecosystem with respect to biomagnification. Now, in the context of air quality, the information has been listed under Annexure 1, which I shall be sharing with you in the further slides. Not only has this slide indicated the pollution aspects, but also if you look at the last column, they have stressed about the percentage deviation from the prescribed standards. Part D, slide number 15, speaks about hazardous waste. Now, it's obvious that this industry has been employing certain good measures, because as a consequence of this, you can see that the quantity of hazardous waste has actually come down drastically from 2014-15 to 2015-16. It could be the used oil or the used grease. So this is one advantage. When you understand how the pattern of consumption is, the pattern of production is, the industry or the industrialist or the occupier gets an opportunity to self-assess, self-decide where he or she stands. Let's move on to slide 16. Part E of slide 16 shows the data with respect to solid waste. In this slide, it shows nil across all entries. That is because this industry doesn't produce any amount of solid waste, but this need not be the case across all industries. Slide 17. This speaks about the characteristics and the quantum of waste which has been generated. Now, if you look at part F, okay, the first table speaks about the hazardous waste which is being generated, how much is being generated, and actually how is it being handled. Now let's discuss about solid waste. As it was mentioned in slide 16, there is no quantity of solid waste which is being generated from the process or the pollution control facilities. However, in this table it's very clear that the solid waste which is generated from the other sectors have been documented, have been accounted for. This is one advantage of this particular statement, Form 5, which ensures that every single material which has consequences on the environment is accounted for, and no industry can omit it. Let's move on to slide 18. So slide 18 basically speaks about what are the sample pollution control measures which has been taken and how has it impacted the conservation of natural resources and probably also the cost of production. So if you look at this particular slide 18, it speaks about the industry equipped with air pollution control devices like the filters, electrostatic precipitators. It speaks about continuous air quality monitoring stations. So, particularly from industry to industry, the information which has been entered here will vary. However, the essence of why this particular clause is mentioned is to ensure that the industry takes all precautionary measures, all measures for pollution control, all measures for pollution prevention, which helps in conserving the natural resources, which also helps in cutting down the cost of production. This is an exercise which helps the industry to self-assess itself. Let's move on to part H, slide 19. So this basically speaks about all the additional measures or the investment proposals which is in place, which has been incorporated or incepted by the industry again towards protecting the environment and cutting down of pollution. Now, in this particular slide, the industry has spoken about developing a green belt. It has spoken about spraying water. So again, this information will vary from industry to industry, from practice to practice. But this clause in statement, that is your form 5, is to motivate the industries to go beyond their actual expectations. Let's move on to slide 20. So, as I said, part I basically speaks about the miscellaneous aspects. So, any other aspect which has an impact or a bearing on the environment and has been omitted or has been left out from the regular entries of form 5 needs to be entered here. Let's go on to slide 21, which basically is an annexure. Now, generally in form 5, the framework only runs to 3 to 4 pages, but the annexures can run as more as 20 to 50 pages. Basically, annexure contains all the proof, all the supporting documents for all the entries which has been made from part A to part I. And these documents, when submitted to the Pollution Control Board, the State Pollution Control Board, would obviously be verified, not just on the basis of the first 4 pages, but based on the supporting documents along with it. So here you can see in Annexure 1, they have provided proof, they have provided information with respect to the air quality standards around the industry. Moving further, in slide 22, it speaks about the stack emission report with respect to the control equipments. Slide 23, significance. So how exactly will making an industry fill form 5 help the environment? All the necessary entries what the industry makes helps towards pollution control, helps towards pollution prevention. It gives insight to the industry to realize how to spend its finances. It invariably helps in conservation of natural resources. There is a long-term growth and sustainability when it comes to the industry and the environment. There is a steady monitoring which is taking place for every industry, for every year, as this document is submitted to the Pollution Control Board. And if there is any violation, or if there is any compliance not being met, or if there is any serious deviation, responsibility lies on the occupier, lies on the industry. Hence, they are also accountable for it. So this is an interesting measure which helps the industries to curb their pollution activities. Let's summarize Slide 24. As I said, there are 9 parts. The part A discussed the basic details. Part B speaks about the consumption pattern of water and any other raw material. Part C discusses the pollution aspects with respect to air and water. Part D speaks about hazardous waste generation. Part E speaks about solid waste. Part F discusses the characteristics and disposal practices of both hazardous and solid waste. Part G speaks about the impact of the pollution abatement measures on the conservational aspects and the productional cost. Part H speaks about any additional measures and investment proposals which the industry has undertaken to protect the environment and cut down the pollution. Part I contains details which have not been asked or required in the previous parts. Hence, all miscellaneous data is mentioned herewith. Slide 25. I have listed few references which I had referred while making this presentation. Reference number 1 basically gives the link, basically is the portal or the repository for the blank template of Form 5. References 2, 3 and 4 are the filled forms which I had acquired from the respective occupiers. Slide 26. In the next class, my dear friends, we shall be discussing about environmental audits, the different types of audits, the role of auditors. Slide 27. I once again thank all of you for your patient hearing. Take care. Have a great day. This is Rajesh Gopinath signing off. Godspeed.